What's up, everybody? My name is Stefan. I'm owner of Mutual Trust or Mutual State Insurance. This is a connection of mine. Nate, is it Pio or Peo?
Peo.
Peo. Nate Peo has been very kind to give me his time today, and I thank you very much for that, sir.
Well, thank you for having me on. I love coming on other people's shows and it being somebody else being the host for once.
All right. So I saw within your profile that you have experience when it comes to construction management, and you're a super connector, and you're a mover and a shaker, you might say. So how do you kind of like get into that?
I got into construction through college. I did a construction management degree and graduated, got a job in construction, moved to California, and then after a few years got into the home building industry and been there roughly ever since, about 15 years. So that's how I got kind of started in residential home construction. As for being a super connector, it was like an evolution of figuring out that every time I grew my network within my industry, even from just like a small amount of just a handful of people I knew to people in the industry to people in the national side of things, every time I grew my network, I realized I had better luck in the job office. And what I realized was it wasn't that I knew a bunch of people and it got me a bunch of more money and a career development, but it was essentially I knew a ton more people that could solve problems. And the more problems I could solve, the more valuable I became. So once I started realizing that there's power in your network, I started going all in on it and trying to see how big I could grow it and see what happens with this idea of like growing your network, meeting crazy people from all over the world with new ideas, new experiences. Like, where would that take you? And I just assumed if I thought I'd have no idea where 5 years it would take me, what would that journey look like? And that's how I became, I guess, a super connector, was just intentionally making connections with lots of people and looking to have a solution for every problem somebody might have.
Wow, you started that like about 5 years ago, you said?
No, I started, well, not intentionally. I think like about 5 years ago, I started connecting and networking with more people outside of my like close circle. And then as it expanded, I started realizing it was about a year ago, just over a year ago, I went on this mission of like, hey, I'm just going to see where it takes me if I'm just very indiscriminate of who I meet with, not just people within my industry, but amazing people from all walks of life, every kind of industry, any type of business, just meeting cool people that know other cool people.
That's awesome, dude. Yeah, for me, myself, I started going down that journey myself in regards to just like, connecting with anybody and everybody. I'll be honest though, when it comes to the Bitcoin type peoples, I have a little difficulty with, but I try not to be judgmental.
Yeah, well, somebody that you kind of know a fake account, and a lot of the Bitcoin Forex people seem to be fake accounts with like, hey, there's this conversation script that's trying to get you to do something. I usually try to avoid those too, but as for like being discriminate, a lot of people are like, well, if I don't know somebody, I won't accept the connection request or know of them. And I would say that has not worked well for me. It's been quite the opposite. If I've accepted everybody that comes across my plate, chances are it's going to benefit me in some way. Either A, it's just an added connection, it's more eyes on my message, or B, it's going to turn into a relationship that I didn't think I would have had otherwise. And there's been countless times where I've looked at somebody on a piece of paper and just thought, hey, you're in another country, you're in a business that I'm not interested in, or you're selling something I would never buy. Chances are we'd never cross paths in our lives. And I've had conversations with them that lasted for an hour, which turned into doing a podcast and then being on my podcast, and then turned into making strategic introductions. So for me, you never know who it is you're going to meet and how they might make a difference in your life. So if you're pre-qualifying the people you meet, or pre-qualifying the people you think somebody else should meet, like, oh, Stefan's never, this probably isn't somebody that he'd want to meet. Well, that's not my decision to make. That's yours to make. And so I should, if I feel compelled to make an introduction, I should do it. And once I've kind of adopted that policy, I've met some really, really amazing people, and I've been able to make strategic introductions to other people that they really value.
Do you have like an example of something that really sticks out to you in regards to like connecting and things of that nature?
There's a woman that lives in Australia, and she was like a business coach. She had a podcast called The Business Scientist, and she was kind of combining like her scientific background of analytics with business and like more like leadership, like stuff that's a little bit more um, theoretical than provable. And you go, well, I don't need a business coach in Australia, and I'm never going to go to Australia. And why would I, need to meet this person? But I took the meeting, or she took my meeting request, however you want to look at it. We ended up being on the phone for like an hour and a half. Then she did my podcast for like an hour, and then I did hers for like an hour, and then we had conversations after the fact for an hour and a half. And then she's so amazing that we've made a bunch of introductions to other people within our circle, and everybody rants and raves about how awesome she was. And if I had looked at that piece of paper and just said like, hey, there's no reason to meet, I'm going to pass on this, I would have missed the opportunity to make a good friend.
Wow, check that out, man. So in your profile, I had read that you were an introvert at one time. You don't really look like an introvert now. So tell me about that journey.
I think, there's the difference between introverted and being shy. And I'm definitely an introvert, and I was shy. And by introverted, it's like you get or give energy with how you interact with people. So an introvert gives a lot of energy, and they get worn out from it. An extrovert feeds off the energy of the conversation. They get energized. And so if I'm around a lot of people, having conversations, I can get worn out and just need to like go crawl into a hole and just like recoup for a bit. But I did used to be shy. And I think part of it is I didn't know how to act at networking events. I didn't know how to make new friendships with people. I was on the purchasing side of the table. So a lot of times people would be approaching me to sell me something. So I would try to, I don't want to talk to them. They're going to try to sell me something I don't want to buy. But I also had jobs too where I did sales. And it's also very nerve-wracking to be at an event when you're like, I got to be talking to people. And if I'm not talking to people, handing out my business card, I'm wasting my time. And so you think like every networking event has to have this transactional conversation with every person you meet. So you don't like going to them because you're looking at it the wrong way. You're looking at something that's going to take energy from you. It's not going to build deep, meaningful relationships. It's awkward. You've overthought everything that could possibly go wrong and who you might have to talk to. And so it's just like, this is exhausting. I'm tired before I even get there. I don't want to go. I don't want to be there. And then if you do end up making it, then you're trying to like, how soon can I leave the door? Like, how can I get out of there? So what I kind of realized is I don't have to be there to meet a bunch of people, pass out business cards. But if I'm there to meet people of like, who else could I introduce them to? Who else could I make a connection to? What could I learn about that person? It gave me a purpose of being there. And it was something that I felt comfortable about because it was asking instead of taking. So I'm asking for information about you. I'm asking to get to know you a little bit better. I'm not taking this value of like, what can you do for me and trying to run with it. So once I started kind of adopting that approach, networking events became a lot more fun. They were exciting to meet somebody new, to hear their story about what they did, what they did differently, and what their background was, and interesting hobbies they might have. And the funny thing is the more you do something, the better you get at it. You become a lot more comfortable meeting people. Like, if I was going to be meeting somebody I'd never met before, like yourself, 7, 8, 9 years ago, I'd be like, well, what are we going to talk about? And now I've done it so much that I feel very comfortable. Like you said, hey, we're going to do 30 minutes today. I say, okay, 30 minutes is easy because I know that if it gets quiet, I'm going to start asking you questions, and eventually you're going to start answering them, and we're going to start a conversation about something you're interested in. And so that's really what I discovered when you go to the events is if you're worried about the conversation becoming awkward, you're worried about it being like run out of steam, it's usually because you're worried that you're going to have to talk about yourself, and you're worried that you're going to have to talk too much about what you do, and you're going to run out of interest of being like upfront about like, I got to tell these things. So you get nervous, or you talk about trivial things like, oh, how's the weather? Or what do you think about the Cubs this year? It gets boring. But when you start like knowing like what kind of questions get somebody talking about what they're interested in, like you can turn into a mediocre conversation into a great conversation very quickly. And then if you're having fun, I'm having fun in this conversation, chances are somebody else is going to see us having a good time, and they're going to be a part of that conversation. And if 3 people are having a conversation that's exciting, 5, 6, 7 other people are saying, oh, and so all of a sudden you're the life of the party when you're bringing a good energy to it and getting to know other people. So when everybody asks like, how do you become more extroverted? It's like, just learn to ask better questions, get connected to the people that you're talking to, and ask them things that matter. Like what are their goals? What are their bucket lists? What's something interesting nobody else knows about them? Or, and eventually they'll answer, they'll give you the answers, and just start having a conversation after that.
That's awesome, dude. I myself, grew up very shy, and I'm still overcoming that aspect, you might say. To a certain degree, I'm very much an introvert. And I very much agree when it comes to being able to ask people questions. Like back in the previous recession, like 2008 or so, I went to like the networking meetings, and it wasn't there, to offer services. It was there to just basically get to know people, because I didn't have employment back then. And so, I just have like my 30, second, elevator speech, just saying, hey guys, my name is Stefan. I'm here just because, I want to get to know you guys better. I don't have work right now, but if I can be of service to you, let me know, that type of thing. And it was awesome, because afterwards, the conversations that I was able to have with people, and just being upfront and just getting to know, who they were, and what they were about. I mean, like you said, once you get to know, who they are, and you're able to ask questions, and you're able to feed off that energy and give that energy, I mean, it's a back and forth. Is there any books, or is there any like type of material that helped you along with that?
Yeah, yes and no. So there's a book called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi, and it's about growing your network, and just basically like the premise is don't miss opportunities to meet somebody new. So a lot of times we take our lunch breaks and we go eat, at the picnic table outside by ourselves, or we go for a walk or something like that. And his premise was like, hey, you should be having every opportunity to meet with somebody new you haven't met with, or meet and reconnect with a new connection. So it's like, instead of like having, lunch once a week with somebody, try to, or the same people every day, is mix it up, meet somebody new every single day at lunch, and never take those for granted. And it kind of like turns out to like maybe a breakfast or a coffee, or if you, going for a run, ask somebody to come for a run with you. And the more you're having these conversations with people you've never met before, over time, it's going to add up to a tremendous amount of networking that you have. And then he talks about how to nurture those relationships, how to check in, how to be authentic with those people. And I think that's key, is it's about serving them first without expectation, and trying to give as much value back to them first. And then that karma comes back around. There was another book called Digital Persuasion, and it's more about a networking through digital marketing via email, social media, that type of stuff. And it talks about how to really get a conversation going without coming across as salesy and pitchy. And it's the theme in that is personal, useful, brief. And so if you're doing an outreach to somebody, you try to do a little research on them, find something that's personal to them, something that you might have in common. Like you're here, you're a grill master. So maybe something like, hey, did you see this thing that's going on over here at this grilling event, or something similar? And then it's useful. It's something that you value, and then it's brief. It's very short. It's like 1 to 2 sentences, and it's basically just an icebreaker to get you to go, hey, I've never seen anybody message me like this before. I'll respond back, because they took the time to introduce themselves properly, and then you follow up with a conversation. And so those two have been pivotal in the sense of they kind of laid the foundation, and then what they teach is able to extract it, which is really just remembering everybody's human. People are looking for a connection, a common denominator between each other and find each other relatable. So if you can figure out how to do that, you're going to start, making better connections.
Awesome, dude. I've been reading like a book by Chris Voss. I can't remember the name of it, but basically talking about negotiating and not splitting the difference. He talks about like labeling and mirroring people. Like basically with his negotiation, it was just interesting in regards of how the book talks about how the process that he took, throughout the years to be able to get to that point where he could actually talk with, criminals that are like, trying to like, get hundreds of thousands of dollars, and things of that nature. And when you look at it, basically you can see, okay, well, how can I apply that towards life? How can I apply that towards business? And I just found that personally interest, because just in regards of like mirroring and labeling, it allows you to also carry on a conversation with people that you may not necessarily know how to go about doing it. For you yourself, though, I mean, what are your goals when it comes to like your business? I mean, what are you doing now?
What am I doing now? I got a couple things going on. So I'm doing consulting in the residential world of construction development, real estate development. So I'm working with builders, developers who have projects that they're looking at either figuring out what they want to build, or they're looking to build it more efficiently. And then I also do LinkedIn business growth coaching for B2B salespeople. Well, they could be really not just salespeople, but they tend to be in the building industry, and they're looking to stand out in the crowd amongst a crazy sea of people on LinkedIn. And I just show them like, hey, here's how you can stand out. Here's the strategy we can put together and implement. So not only are people showing up and landing on your page and get excited to see what you're about, but also doing strategic outreach, so you're connected with the people that really can make a difference in your life.
That's awesome, dude. And then in regards to like your goals for the future, what do you got?
Goals for the future. I think one of my big goals right now is to create a location independent lifestyle where we're not really tied down to one place where we have to show up every day at the office. If we want to, instead of taking a vacation for 2 weeks a year, we're going somewhere we want to live in for a while. Like I don't want to just go to Hawaii for 2 weeks. I want to go there for like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and just live there, not tourist it, but like, what's it like to live there, be a part of that culture, immerse yourself into it. And then maybe after that, you travel to South America, or then maybe it's to Europe, and you're able to just have this way of being able to do your job, your career, your business remotely for the most part. And it can be done anywhere. And you're able to lean into the passions and the vision of what you want your life to be. So it's not just happening to you, but it's happening for you.
Have you been able to visit some of these other places?
No, not yet. Not recently, and not with this intention. Everywhere else has always been the vacation mindset. But I think COVID, the work, how we've adapted through digital technology when COVID happened and to where we're at today, I think it's going to open a lot of doors to make this a lot more possible for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's definitely been a huge push when it comes to, you think of like the Industrial Revolution and how that was like a humongous transformation. I think COVID, basically really pushed us into like the digital age, you might say. And
Yeah.
Where we go with it is, we'll see, but it's definitely been something, that's for sure. How has that affected you personally when it comes to like, your life and business?
I mean, we've been at home for over a year. That was definitely a change. I mean, there's pros and cons to all of that. There's been a variety of levels of what you can do outside of the house and not, and that's impacted lifestyles. My career's definitely switched. My priorities have changed. I've looked from being in a place where, hey, we're working in a place of convenience. It's in a certain mile radius of where I'm willing to drive to, hey, what can I do to make a bigger difference in the world? So I think for me, the biggest thing is eye-opening and refocusing on what my priorities are as a person versus just kind of like going through the motions and creating a career.
And what kind of impact would you like to have on the world?
It's kind of hard to quantify, but I tried to look at it this way as like, how can I make a difference in somebody's life the most impactful way possible? And some of the people, you may be able to open lots of doors, you may be able to do a lot of things for them, you may be able to make a huge difference. And other people, it may just be sharing your story that they hear, and it allows them to change their mindset enough that they realize, hey, this person can do it, I can do it too, and they've decided to, I guess, lean into what their hopes and dreams are. And chances are you'll never know that person. You'll never know you made a difference. You'll never, ever understand if they made an impact or not. But they'll remember someday along the lines. They may not remember who you are, but they'll just remember, hey, I was watching this podcast. Somebody said this one statement and it just stuck with me and it resonated with me. And I realized once I heard that, I could never look at life a different way again. And along the way, it changed me from going down this path of unfulfillment to this path of making a difference. And boom, voila, maybe they cured cancer. Or maybe they just made the best pies in town. Who knows what it was, but they were able to make an impact in life. And that's where, I want to take it. So can you put like a success measurement on it? Probably not, other than, hey, I want to impact 2 million people, which, trickles down. Is probably not as complicated or complex as it sounds, but I don't know how you'd track it.
Okay. I didn't come prepared. I mean, basically, this is my conversation with you. So I mean, I'm very much enjoying it. When it comes to like business processes, I guess I read a book by Michael Gerber called The EMyth, and he was talking about how you kind of want to start with your death in view, you might say, to begin with. What do you want to accomplish out of life, and then kind of reverse engineer it, that type of thing. For me personally, I know that I want to be able to take care of my family, into future generations, and that's like my why. What would be like your why?
I mean, my why, part of it is having and providing for my family for future generations as well, making a impact that they can look up to and want to be inspired. I think I also want to not only provide for them, but give them like life lessons and skills that they could learn to do this on their own, that they don't need to be dependent on what was handed to them, but they basically learned like, hey, I've been through conflict and I've overcome it, and I can learn from it, and I can go out and do the same. So to me, I think that's really important. I think it's about spreading kindness and empathy to the world. They're a little bit like woo-woo stuff, but when I get up, I think about like, hey, who can I make a difference in their life? Who could I make? I mean, I kind of have this thing of like, hey, if I meet 2 people every single day and I introduce them to 2 more people over the course of a year, I've made 1,500 connections. And what does 1,500 connections look like? What does that trickle down to do? And at the time, me and you talk for 20 minutes and introduce you to 2 people, like, I don't know, might not go anywhere, but it might go somewhere, right? And so those things can influence your life. Just kind of like your mere existence of being on the earth has influenced and made a difference. And so I want to be as cognizant of that as possible and try to, bring everybody that I come into contact with at least a little bit closer to where they feel their purpose is in life.
It's awesome, dude. For me, I'm still growing. I mean, I have maybe a little over 1,000 connections, and I made it a point to reach out to at least 250 of them to say thank you for being part of my network and just viewing my happy face. And it was interesting because like the thanks that was coming back was not really expected either, because I mean there's people across the world that stuff that we appreciate, the fact that you're there, you're all happy, and you have something of value to give. It's like, oh, okay, thank you. And all too often, it's easy for us to not really think beyond like our own little screen, you might say, and to realize that yes, we have a broader audience, and how is it that we're going to reach out to such people, and how are we going to develop the world for a better future, you might say. I mean, how is it that we're going to have an impact on people? And so it's very interesting to me to see that. Is there anything from like our end where we would be able to help you?
I think you know, the way we help and support each other is it's kind of like when we go out there and we start, let's just say we're starting networking, or we're starting on LinkedIn, or we're starting on growing our personal brand, whatever you want to call it. And you go out there and you're nervous the first time and you post something and nobody engages with it. And you're like, oh man, nobody really cared. So you do it a second or third time and still not a lot of engagement. And so you give up, right? And because you give up, you didn't really push yourself. Like, you didn't discover it. There's when I first started being active on social media, it always came to a point where there's something of importance you needed to say, and I would hold back to say it. Like, oh, you posted a picture of what you ate for lunch. Like, nobody cares, right? And it's not very polarizing viewpoint to say I had a hamburger, right? Maybe somebody eat a salad instead, but it's not that big deal. Like, there's not a lot of, nobody's gonna come back and go like, what were you thinking? But there comes a point where you maybe need to express an opinion that might be uncomfortable. Not saying it's like a political thing, but just like, hey, this is what I don't think is right in my workplace. I don't think this is right in my industry. I think this is something that should be changed, right? And if you're not willing to push the limits and share your message, find your voice, it's hard to really discover what you're capable of doing. You're playing small because you're telling yourself that your voice isn't valuable enough to go out to the world, that other people are going to knock it down and their voice is more important than yours. So you hold back and you hold back and you do this, and that's okay. But if you want to be the best version of yourself possible, if you want to inspire others to greatness, if you want to inspire yourself to greatness, you're going to have to push past that limit. So I tell other people, it's like, hey, you see somebody else out there posting and doing some stuff, how hard is it to give them a like? How hard is it to make a comment that says, hey, great job. I know it's your first time, but keep it up. I know it sucks. It's hard. Like, you've done that. You made your first video and you go, I'm nervous about posting this, or made my first, controversial post or vulnerable post. And you're like, what's everybody going to think? And then you post it, and then you realize some people come out and say, hey, look, I like this. I relate to this. I've been in your shoes. I feel that. I'm glad you said this because I was scared to say it myself. And you realize, like, hey, if I feel this way, a lot of other people probably feel this way. So for me, it's supporting everybody and getting them encouraged to share their voice and not be worried that like somebody's going to knock them down a peg because they posted something. So how can you help me? I would say help others, help everybody else find their voice, find their passion, and it'll come back to that. And it wasn't easy for me when I first started doing it, but it becomes a lot more. You become capable. You become better at it. Like, you get a little quicker at your writing style. What maybe took an hour to write a post can take 30 seconds. You can come up with them a lot quicker. What, used to maybe agonize over making a video, like, oh my God, like, how can I get this message condensed to a minute that'll like fit in this thing, and it takes me 3 hours to get it taped, to like, oh, I need to do a video. I can do a minute video in a minute because that's all it takes, right? And then you just post it and you roll with it. So it's that encouragement that helps people find who they are. And when they start discovering their voice, I think they're going to start discovering their purpose and their passions, where they want to go. And that might be career driven. Maybe it's a hobby. Maybe it's just connecting and communicating with other people. Like, the podcasting thing is one of those things where I was like, hey, I'm going to start podcasting. And there's this little community of people that do podcasts. And then if you have a podcast, it's something to connect with somebody. And whether or not they have a big one or a small one or something like that, they know what it's like to put yourself out there, and they want to help and support each other grow. And they'll make intros and they'll make connections and they'll take your calls, and it's amazing. So I think just finding your voice helps you find this little community that you want to be a part of, that you can be your best version of yourself.
It's awesome, dude. I very much appreciate your time, Nate. I mean, it's, the second interview for me, that's live, and it's I'm still getting over the not knowing what to say and all that kind of stuff. But I very much appreciate your time. And is there anything else that you would like, maybe a nugget of advice that you'd want to give to anybody out there, something that somebody could kind of hold on to that might change their life?
I think for me, it's always those things that you want to do, but you don't think you have time to do, or it's not a good time to do in the future. It never gets any better. It never gets easier. Never gets a better time. Right now is always the best time. And the last thing you want to do is be 3 years, 5 years down the road and be like, man, I should have should have started back then when I wanted to. And I think you'll be happier with yourself, even if you don't have the time to put all the efforts into it. Like you say, I want to start a podcast. Like, okay, well, you can start one tomorrow after you decide today to do it, but chances are it's going to take a little bit of planning, like 2 or 3 months, and get going, and then you do it. And if you say like, hey, I don't have the time, I'll wait 6 months to do it, and then I'll start. It's like, well, why don't you spend those 6 months just taking the small steps, right? And figuring those things out, because there's a lot you think you're going to know, and it's going to change drastically. It's like, hey, I know I'm going to go do something. Okay, well, 100% guarantee whatever you think it is exactly you're going to do, it will be different. So if you know it's going to be different, stop waiting for it to be perfect and start it now, because in a few years, you're going to wish, oh man, wish I'd started that sooner.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. Thank you, Nate.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
That was fun.